TRACS Tenant Queries, Class Code SS 2.2, revised May 2019. As a recap, what is TRACS? We need to be ensure that we are TRACS compliance by demonstrating that residents are qualified correctly, that tenant rent and assistance payments are calculated correctly, that existing residents comply with annual recertification, that residents who pass away or move out are processed correctly, that unit rent and utility allowance are correct and updated, and finally, that the monthly HAP is correct and we're receiving the correct amount of subsidy. The voucher tenant queries are going to assist you with ensuring that all residents are receiving annual recertification, that move-outs are being processed, and that any rent schedule changes that affect unit rent or utility allowance are processed in TRACS. TRACS is a subsystem within the Secure Systems web system. You should see that listed under your Systems menu when you sign into Secure Systems, the Tenant Rental Assistance Certification System, or TRACS. If you do not see TRACS and you require access to it, please contact the main office and we will direct you accordingly. Once you select the TRACS system, you should see Voucher Tenant Queries link. Select that link and you will see the Queries/Reports menu for TRACS. In this session, we'll be discussing the queries that are listed on the right-hand side under Tenant. TRACS Tenant Queries provide detailed information on the certifications received and accepted for each household at your property. You are most likely to use the Certification Query, Certifications with Discrepancies Query, Late Recertification Query, Move-in, Move-out Query, and Multiple Occupancy Query. To start, the Certification Query is a great way to ensure that your compliance percentage is 100% and to review detailed information regarding any households that may be affecting your compliance percentage. For example, you'll be reviewing to ensure that active households on your HAP appear in TRACS, that households are in the correct unit, that the last certification is recorded correctly with the correct type and effective date, that the last action recorded correctly, that the correct assistance is listed, the household is active, and if there are any unexplained errors, that we are addressing these errors and correcting them in a timely manner. If any of the answers to those questions are no, you should know why. So for example, is the move-in or annual recertification not processed because there was a fatal error and the certification was rejected? We can obtain that information from TRACS. As a reminder, we are required to monitor TRACS to ensure that all of our transmissions are recorded correctly. Your TRACS certification list is going to look like the screenshot on this window here. So you'll see on the left-hand side the tenant name. It is blue. It is a clickable link that will give you detailed information about that household. The next column is Social Security number, followed by unit number. The effective date is the last full certification that was processed. And the cert type, you'll see AR or move-in in that column. The action code and action effective date are going to be those partial certifications that are transmitted, such as unit transfers, gross rents, and move-outs. You'll then see the effective date for that action listed in that next column. The TRACS process date is going to be the date that that certification was either sent by you or your CA to TRACS, and TRACS processed the certification. And following that, you'll see the breakdown of the assistance payment, total tenant payment, annual income, adjusted income, and gross rent for that household. Reviewing those columns will ensure that the certification that is listed in TRACS is the same certification that you have in one site and the same certification that the household has signed and is in their resident file. If you have done a correction or there was an update due to a gross rent, You will want to identify those errors and transmit those missing certifications. Further to the right, you'll see the column Next Recert Date. It is imperative to pay attention to that next recert date and ensure that it lines up with the AR that was transmitted, as this is what TRACS is going to use when it is terminating households due to late recertifications. So if the next recertification date is incorrect and it is sooner than it should be, you will need to correct your AR and ensure that the next recert date is correct so that that household does not get terminated in TRACS. On this screen, you'll note that 4 of the households are highlighted in blue and 1 household is highlighted as white. Those blue highlighted households are all what are considered active households in TRACS. So these are occupied units with households that have complied with the annual recertification requirement. If a household is listed as white, such as the 4th one down, this household is no longer active. The reason this household is not active is the last action was a move out. So that household has moved out of that unit, which is a valid reason why they are no longer active. So what makes a household active? A move-in certification, an initial certification, or an annual recertification that was effective within the last 15 months to the day. While we do have to process an annual recertification every 12 months, TRACS does give us a grace period of 3 months in order to get that certification processed and transmitted. If at that 15-month mark there is no annual recertification, that is when that household will be marked as an inactive household, and they will no longer be part of your active tenant count, which could affect your compliance percentage. Another way that TRACS can affect other systems that you're using is EIV. The way that EIV obtains data regarding the household is through TRACS files. If you are unable to obtain EIV reports, and the EIV reports are telling you that a current 50059 was not found for that head of household, it may mean that the certification is missing in TRACS. So if you are finding this error in your EIV reports, it is required that you go into TRACS, visit the certification query, and determine why EIV cannot find the 50059 data. So again, clicking on the household name on the left-hand side is going to allow you to conduct further investigation into that household. After clicking on the head of household name, you will see a nice sub-menu here regarding certification discrepancies or the certification history list. If you view certification discrepancies, this is going to review any discrepancies related to that specific certification that was listed on the certification query and is listed in the above portion of that screen grab. It says effective date 11/1/2018. By clicking on certification history list, however, it will give you historical certifications that were transmitted and allow you to drill down into discrepancies for those historical certifications. So as an example, this household below, you'll see I've highlighted both the first and the most recent certifications in this list. And that is because the cert type has asterisks next to it. Those 2 certifications with asterisks have errors that need to be reviewed. So if you see a cert type that is surrounded by asterisks, please review the discrepancies for that certification. So in this case, if we click on the head of household name, it will allow us to drill down into the errors specific to that certification. So clicking on the head of household name, You'll see this sub list. Again, discrepancies related directly to this certification, or the member list, which will show us the list of all members on the certification. So selecting the discrepancies link shows us the discrepancy, provides a description, a recommendation, and an action required. So it's important that you understand what each of these discrepancies require of you. So in this case, action 3 is going to be something to take note of that may or may not be an error. So this may be correct. However, it appears that there are new household relationship codes that may apply to this household member. So you would need to review this household and ensure that the relationship code still applies to the member. And you can see which member it is. Towards the right hand side, member number, in this case 02. Now action codes. So action code 1 is an error that must be corrected within the next 45 days. In most cases, your CA is going to contact you and require correction before they will finish approving your HAB. Action code 2 is an error that must be corrected with your next transmission. So in most cases, this is going to be the next time you submit an AR or IR for the household, or the next time you submit a HAB. Action code 3 is something to take note of that may or may not be an error. And action code 4 is informational and asking you to check the resident information to address a HUD concern. In most cases, this is going to be a household that is either overhoused or underhoused. So again, in the example below, we can see that the action required code is 3. So this is something to take note of that may or may not be an error. So you'll want to go to one site, pull the resident file, and ensure that the relationship code for member number 2 is correct and does not require an update. In order to determine who is member number 2, go back to the certification detail options and select the certification member list option, and this is going to give you the list of members in the household. Now here is another discrepancy list. You'll see quite a few discrepancies for the certification selected. And in this instance, we have a couple of findings that are errors that must be corrected with the next transmission. You'll see those are the first 2 errors listed, and those involve the income limits. So it's possible that new income limits were put into place and did not get picked up on this 50059. In this case, we would correct the certification and include it with our next HAB request. You'll see the remainder of the errors are action code 3, which is something to take note of that may or may not be an error. So this is around the previous housing code, displacement status, a different name for Social Security claim, and tenant and SSA income are different. So the SSA is giving a different amount. So ensuring that you have the correct income listed. And on the right hand side there, you can see that it's indicating member number 1 specific to those last 2 findings. So you want to review the name on the claim and the amount of the claim and ensure that they are correct. Selecting that list of household members will give you a screen such as this to give you each household member on that certification specifically. Their last name, first name, middle initial if applicable, social security number, or alien registration number, the relationship code, so thinking back to a few slides ago where the relationship code of L was an issue, and the next column is the member number. So any discrepancies tied to the certification that lists the member number are referring to the specific member identified by that member number. Moving into the certifications with discrepancies, this is going to give you a much more focused view of any discrepancies that have occurred at your property regarding certifications. So while you can review the certification query and look for certifications with asterisks, you can use this report for a quick list of errors. So in this case, you'll see something very similar to what we're reviewing, where you will have the project number, unit number, tenant name, SSN, the effective date of the certification that has the error, the number of days resolved, and that action code. And those action codes remain the same, where number 3 is an item to review that may or may not be an error, and item number 1 is something that must be corrected. On the far right, you can see the discrepancy description. And if you were to have any issues with understanding those discrepancies, you can always contact your CA or your compliance analyst for assistance. The late recertification query is going to assist you with identifying households that either missed their annual recertification or the annual recertification did not record in TRACS correctly. This can affect your compliance percentage and make it drop under 90%. Compliance percentage under 90% means that your voucher will not be paid. So for annual recertifications, we need to ensure that we are recertifying households every 12 months. And TRACS will give us that grace period of an additional 3 months for a total of 15 months that households are allowed to be active prior to them being terminated by the system. If they are terminated by the system, they are no longer listed as active in TRACS. This will reduce your compliance percentage, and the household will then appear in the late annual recertification report. To run that late recertification report, select your contract number or project number and click Submit. As for the report type, I always run by all certifications because this is going to assist me with identifying households that may be late and not yet terminated. The late recertification report will look like this screen grab here, where you will see the project number, the unit number, tenant name, social security number, the effective date of the last annual recertification, and the projected next recertification date that TRACS is looking for a recertification to be submitted for. You'll then see the number of days late. If there is something in the termination date column, this means that this household has been terminated and is no longer listed as active in TRACS. And under termination reason, if you see HQ, this means that HUD or TRACS itself has terminated this household because no certification was transmitted for them. If you are seeing households that are terminated here, you'll want to go into one site and review their certifications tab and ensure that that certification was generated, was approved, was then completed with signature dates, and that it has either already reported on a HAP and has been transmitted in TRACS, or is due to report on a HAP, in which case you will then transmit that certification through TRACS. If it has not yet been finalized or completed and it's sitting in approved status, that certification will not send. It will not report on a HAP, and you will not be able to send it through TRACS. If you review that certification tab and you see that that AR was transmitted to your CA, be sure you check with your CA to find out why that certification did not yet hit TRACS. It is possible there were errors that needed to be corrected before your CA could finish processing it. So you want to ensure that those certifications and any errors that have occurred have been addressed and that we are resubmitting that AR as needed. The move-in, move-out report is going to give you an itemized list of any move-ins or move-outs that were received and accepted by TRACS. Again, any missing move-ins or move-outs may affect your compliance percentage. So if you have a missing move-out, it could be why your compliance percentage is over 100%. And if you're missing a move-in, it could be why your compliance percentage is under 100%. So this is a very helpful report for identifying these errors. When you run this, you can select a specific date range. I would suggest running the certification activity report in one site as well for move-ins and move-outs for the same period so that you can match up and ensure that all of your activity has been reported. Again, these certifications do affect EIV as well. So if EIV cannot find the 50059, it may be due to a missing move-in certification. If you have a household listed on the deceased tenants report in EIV, it may be that the move-out was not accepted in TRACS. So reviewing TRACS will assist you with correcting EIV errors or discrepancies. The multiple occupancy query is going to assist you with identifying units that have 2 active households. This generally means that a move-out certification was not received or accepted by TRACS. When you run this report, you will see any units that have multiple households listed. Identify the household that should be moved out or should have a unit transfer to another unit. Contact your CA and work with them to correct the error. Now, when you are correcting TRACS tenant data, once you've identified the issue, you'll need to work with your CA on the next steps. If your CA received the file, there were no errors, they may be able to push it to TRACS for you, and they will let you know if this transmission is successful. If your CA did not receive the file, you'll need to go to one site and transmit this. If you need assistance with transmitting TRACS data, please see Class SS 2.3. The file will then go to your CA for review and approval before the CA transmits to TRACS for you. Now, if your CA reports to you that there are errors with that file, please note that you will need to correct any errors noted before your CA can transmit to TRACS. If you require any assistance with correcting TRACS tenant data, please be sure to contact your senior manager or your compliance analyst.